김대중 대통령에 대해서 좀 이야기를 나누고 싶은데요. 김대중 대통령은 미국과 중국 그리고 일본과 소련까지 자국의 안보와 평화를 위해서 우호적인 스탠스를 모두 취하고 있었는데 현재 정부에서는 조금 미국이나 일본에 좀 편향되어 있는 느낌을 받고 있습니다. 그리고 중국과 러시아 등과는 좀 멀어지는 느낌이고요. 외교 전문가로서 이런 한국의 스탠스는 어떤 득과 실이 있다라고 판단하십니까?
Well, it's kind of you to call me a diplomatic expert, so let me say thank you. I mean, I think if you look at President Kim Dae-jung, obviously two important contributions among others. One was ushering in the democratization of South Korea. And I think the second was his embrace of trying to find peaceful ways to settle differences among countries, and that is to be lauded. Obviously, he sought to do so with sunshine policy toward North Korea, and as you point out with your question, tried to work out differences with the United States, China, and Russia. Those efforts, I think, failed, not because of his lack of effort. I think because the countries we're talking about, particularly China and Russia, had different ambitions and different objectives. And I think one of the things we all need to recognize is how different the world is today than it was a quarter of a century ago. And that's one of the sort of striking things, and maybe historians will remark upon it in the future. But when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, I think there was a heady promise that countries would be able to build a more just, stable, prosperous world order, that geopolitical competition and rivalry would go by the wayside, that the great powers would learn to work with one another, there would be partnerships. That view, that optimistic view, which I think President Kim endorsed and encouraged, was certainly one held in the United States. The United States, after all, embraced a policy of strategic engagement with China. That policy was based on the idea that bringing China into the economic system, the Western economic system, would be good for China, good for the United States, and good for the rest of the world. I think those hopes have been dashed over time. We could write books about why that would be the case, but we're now in a very different world in which geopolitical rivalry has reared its ugly head again. And I think the challenge for us is to find ways to limit that competition, that rivalry, to peaceful ways. And I think you can take from Kim Dae-jung's legacy an important lesson, which is even in dark times, don't lose sight of the potential to find compromise, to find a way to have a dialogue with others. And I would sort of put it in the terms of an American president, John F. Kennedy, who in his inaugural address said, let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. And I think it's in that spirit we need to go forward, otherwise we face great peril.
김대중 대통령 때 미국은 빌 클린턴 시대였었는데요. 그때는 북한에 대한 규제보다 방금 말씀하신 존 F 케네디처럼 대화와 협력을 통해서 문제 해결을 좀 더 우선시했던 것 같고요. 그 덕분에 남북 정상회담이라든가 아니면 동티모르 사태라든가 여러 가지들의 해결과 성과들이 있었던 걸로 보입니다. 이 두 분의 그런 화해 제스처가 어떤 성과가 났었는지 그거에 대해서 조금 더 구체적으로 설명이 가능하실까요?
I would answer your question this way. I think it was an effort worth making. It did not achieve the desired results. I think that's obvious to all. But that doesn't mean the effort was wrong or mistaken. The challenge in international relations and navigating the gulfs that exist between countries is that you can extend an open hand. You can encourage someone to work with you. You can't make them. And I think all the signals from North Korea have been that they're not interested in working with, whether it's your government, South Korea, or with the United States. That what they have regrettably done is taken any concessions offered, pocketed them, and to the extent they've made promises, broken them relatively easy and relatively quickly. Now, again, that doesn't mean that there's no hope down the road for a negotiated solution. I think obviously for all the people of South Korea, people in Northeast Asia, we definitely want to have a peaceful resolution. We certainly do not want to see war break out on the Korean Peninsula. And what that reminds us of, even if we think the chances of negotiation are thin, that's not a reason not to try to negotiate. That's not a reason not to search for a potential positive outcome. Perhaps things may change in the North that will create an opening. That can't say that it will. In politics and diplomacy, you have to confront the world as it is, not the way you wish it would be. But the notion of being hard-headed about the world shouldn't be taken to mean that you dismiss opportunities for success. Again, if there's one lesson from history that I remind everybody of, is that history can surprise you. Events can change. Opportunities can arise. And truly great statesmen and stateswomen seize those opportunities. They recognize they exist and make something of them.
다음은 미국 대선과 관련된 연관된 좀 질문인데요. 미국의 대선은 지금 안개 속입니다. 만약에 트럼프의 재집권이 일어난다면은 한반도엔 어떤 영향이 있을 거라고 보시는가요? 과거에 트럼프가 있을 때 한국은 약간의 경제적인 이득과 불편함도 좀 겪기도 했었고 남북 관계가 약간 완화되는 부분도 있었기 때문에 트럼프 재집권이 한반도에 미치는 영향이 궁금해지는 때입니다.
My honest answer is I do not know. And while it is interesting to speculate about who will win the 2024 US presidential election and what will then happen afterwards, I think we should all take a step back and acknowledge that a lot can happen in the 13 months until Americans go to the polls. And none of us know what the outcome is going to be. And I think even looking at a new President Trump or a second Trump presidency, I think it's really hard to predict how it might go. I think there obviously will be or would be continuities with the last administration. I would think it's quite clear that President Trump favors a much more nationalist, self-interested foreign policy with a deep skepticism of the value and contributions of allies. This is no secret to South Koreans. He made it very clear during his presidency that he believed South Korea had been free riding on the United States, stealing jobs from the United States, not paying its fair share. Now, some of those specific issues have been resolved by the Biden administration. Again, one of its priorities in coming to office was taking some of those irritants off the table, like home country support for U.S. military bases in here. Given the way President Trump sees the world, it's likely that those issues would return. And I think the really big question is, would President Trump, the rerun, do what President Trump said he might do the first time around, which is to leave alliances like the U.S. alliance with South Korea. In terms of the specific question of North Korea, again, I do not know. Because if you look back at the first Trump presidency, it did a 180-degree about-face. In the first 12 to 18 months, we'll call it the fire and fury Trump presidency, which continually threatened North Korea. And then seemingly on a dime, it pivoted to, let's go straight to a summit. Now, we had two of those, and they did not yield the breakthroughs that people had held for them. So at the end of the day, would Trump opt for fire and fury or more summit diplomacy? I don't know that any of us know. I'm not even sure Mr. Trump knows.